So there are three lies that can really prevent you from retirement. And okay, these are not necessarily lies, or perhaps we can call them biases or misconceptions, but in any case, they can have a very significant impact on your retirement. So today I'll talk about what they are, and I'll certainly suggest some ways to essentially prevent them from impacting you too much. And by the way, for those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Alex Selesnev, and I run Capital Squared Financial, a wealth advisory firm. So let's get started. So here's the first lie or misconception. Well, I'll just work one more year. I'll work one more year and my situation, in retirement will improve. Well, I'll tell you, in practice, at least in most cases, that is not necessarily the case. And specifically when you start running different, so-called what-if scenarios, if someone decides to retire a year earlier, sometimes a year later, the difference is really not all that significant. So the real question is, do you really want to work one more year? Perhaps you simply don't have that confidence, that 10 out of 10 confidence that you can retire, at your projected retirement date. And that's very important, because that's a big misconception. So then what happens a year later? Perhaps you will do that again. You'll work another year. But the problem is, in terms of enjoying your golden years, your go-go years, which is how some people refer to them, well, the number of those years also decreases, the longer you work. So it's very important that you keep that in mind. Now, the other piece that you really need to keep in mind is that at some point, time does not equal money, actually. Well, it's worth much more than that. And it's interesting for those of my clients already in retirement, and every so often we have this conversation, and I would even ask, would you do anything differently if you could do this all over again? Well, more often than not, what people tell me is, I wish I retired sooner. So here's the second lie. If I'm not working, I'm not going to be as valuable to the rest of the world, essentially. And usually people wouldn't necessarily put it this way, but that's what they're, thinking. Perhaps, again, they're not sharing it with anyone else. But the important part is, for most people at that stage in their life, they have a lot of transferable skills, or very valuable skills and wisdom that can really benefit the world, essentially. I mean, think about doing charitable work. Think about helping your children, or most likely grandchildren at this point, trying to get involved with different communities. That is something you can think about doing. The bottom line is that one of the things I recommend specifically to those who are professionals, you don't have to retire immediately. Try to do it gradually. Consider doing the things you like, and especially when you're at a point when you have that financial freedom, meaning you no longer need to, work, or at least work full time. So here's the third lie. Retirement will be boring. And I'll tell you, this is one of the comments I actually get in some of my meetings when we, talk about someone's retirement plans. And I'll tell you that will likely be the case if you spend zero time thinking about what you're going to do in retirement. And what immediately comes to mind is, well, I'm going to retire, I'm going to travel a lot, I have all of those destinations in mind, but I need to do much more than that. That tends to last a few, maybe several years, but at some point, you will most likely get bored of doing all of that. So again, you need more than that. Now, purely from the practical perspective, usually people who are, really dislike their job, and they're in some sense running away from it into retirement, those are the ones who experience this feeling. So the bottom line is, you really need to take the time and not only focus on the financial part of your retirement, which is of course very important, but to really have a plan of what you're going to do at least for the next decade. That is usually what I would suggest to my clients.